BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Friday, and Anything Goes Friday. Welcome to the show. The first announcement I need to make is that there will be two small episodes coming out for this Anything Goes segment today. One of them is about the Zodiac Killer that you're listening to now, and the second one is on the CIA, because I received a book from Playtime, and I responded to that one about some of the secrets of the CIA, or perhaps the not-so-well-guarded secrets of the CIA. So that one will be coming out later today. And thank you for listening to this one now. So instead of one longer episode for the Anything Goes segment, divided into two smaller episodes. This one here, Zodiac Killer Geographic Profile, this was one that was requested by Richard Grinnell, who came up with the idea for today's episode. And he also sent me an interview from the channel Profiling Evil, which was talking about finding some anchor points in the true crime world. Which geographic locations have a certain significance of in relation to the mystery in the case? And that's what I'll be discussing today in this Anything Goes segment. So I'm really going to try and stay away from trying to link the locations in the Zodiac Killer mystery to a particular suspect. I'm sure I'll say a few names every now and then, but I would also like to remind everybody that this is one of the topics that was requested. I'm trying to get to as many requested topics as possible. So if you have any ideas for things that you would like covered on the channel or an episode in the future, please put your idea in the comments section below. I will try to get to as many as possible. But the first thing that came to mind immediately when I was learning about the concept of geographic profiling is, what is a place name that is mentioned almost too frequently, or something out of the ordinary? And for me, there's a particular word, a particular name that is, and that is Vallejo. I began to notice that the Zodiac Killer seemed to be talking about Vallejo almost even more frequently than talking about San Francisco. And sometimes you'll find things like in the letter that contains the Z32 cipher, I have become very upset with people of the San Fran Bay Area. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the city of San Francisco. But if we look at Blue Rock Springs Park, the Zodiac identified that as being in Vallejo. And let's go to that letter that says, Dear Editor, this is the murderer of the two teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl on the 4th of July near the golf course in Vallejo. Vallejo is spelled with two L's, though. To prove I killed them, I shall state some facts which only I and the police know. Christmas, the brand of ammo was Super X, 10 shots were fired, the boy was on his back with his feet to the car. The girl was on her right side, feet to the west. On the 4th of July, the girl was wearing patterned slacks, the boy was also shot in the knee, and the brand of the ammo was Western. And it's really, really easy to jump around and kind of self-correct and, automatically correct the Zodiac's language, but there's so many clues that are hidden in each word, to prove I killed them, I will state some facts. No, it has to be, I shall state some facts, and Sword and Korsgaard has a lot to say about the use of the word shall in the Zodiac letters, but this mentions Vallejo, right? So you got Blue Rock Springs, but what do we make of Lake Herman Road, the first canonical Zodiac crime that took place on December 20th of 1968? Lake Herman Road, where David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were shot, is a parking lot that is off the side of the road, and that road is used as a shortcut between Benicia and Vallejo. So already then, this is a shortcut of a road that is connected to Vallejo. And I guess you can see where I'm going with this. either you have a perpetrator who lived in Vallejo, or perhaps spent a very large portion of his life there, and it could even be something as simple as having a regular job in Vallejo. Then you get to Blue Rock Springs, yeah, so we said Blue Rock Springs, excuse me. You get to Lake Berryessa after the material that's discussed in this letter, and you have Lake Berryessa is in Napa County, but Vallejo is not in Napa. I had to look this stuff up. I'm a West Virginian, not a Californian, so all of this stuff is new to me. And it turns out Vallejo is in Solano County. Now, this was only something to talk about because on the car door at Lake Berryessa, the Zodiac wrote Vallejo. There's the Zodiac sign, the word Vallejo, 12/20/68, 7/4/69, September 27th, 69, 6:30, and by 9th. This is coming up again, and for the longest time, I just had kind of accepted that Vallejo was in Napa County because I had previously heard that Lake Berryessa was in Napa County, but Vallejo's in Solano County, and it also appears that Vallejo was spelled correctly in the Zodiac letters, so that just means that no hablo español, and apparently I'm not too good at reading. Okay, so, excuse me for that, but in regards to, this location, I noticed that this was just a place name that is coming up almost too frequently, and you could be like, okay, well, it's just close by, right? And I think that that is one reason, but when the Zodiac mailed in the 3 parts of the cipher, one was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle, one was sent to the San Francisco Examiner, and the third was sent to the Vallejo Times-Herald. And I'm not going to lie to you, that did stand out to me at one point when I first heard about it. I was like, well, that's kind of odd. I mean, I get that he wanted to divide the 408 cipher into 3 parts and then create this puzzle, and he needed a newspaper, but why choose the Vallejo Times-Herald? I mean, is it just the 3rd biggest paper in the area? We definitely know that the Good Times was operating in San Francisco as well, but there might be some significance in that, there might not. I just noticed that the place name Vallejo has been coming up very frequently, so I'm tempted to think that that has either some type of residence, a site of occupation, or maybe somebody spent their childhood in the Vallejo vicinity. In regards to some other places in the Zodiac world, how about Mount Diablo? Because Mount Diablo is one that could be very relevant to geography, because the Zodiac talked about putting the radiance on top of Mount Diablo. And Robert Graysmith, of all people, went through this in Zodiac Unmasked when he said Mount Diablo may have served as the scouting point for the locations. Now, there are people like Michael Cole out there who want to say that the Zodiac was all about committing the crimes that are along these angles, and it's just creating this masterpiece filled with mathematical signatures, and that it has to be along the lines of certain angles, and this was all mathematically determined. The places, not necessarily the victims, but the places were determined. Okay, right? So Mount Diablo served as a reason because it was a place where you could gain access to many different locations in the area. And then also, you have the one arm of the radian going to Blue Rock Springs and one arm of the radian going to Presidio Heights. That's how Presidio gets involved with this, because think about all those things I said, Vallejo, 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 but then you have Presidio Heights, downtown. I mean, the Zodiac is taking a taxi on the 11th of October, murdering Paul Stine, and there are a couple reasons why some people think Paul Stine was murdered. One of them is that they think that Paul Stine was killed because Lake Berryessa was a copycat, and that whole thing about writing the car door message, that might just be somebody messing around, that Lake Berryessa is a copycat, and the Zodiac wanted to mail in a piece of Paul Stine's shirt to prove that he was indeed the killer, because he shoots Paul Stine in the taxi, a piece of his shirt is obtained, and so there's this debate that was going on in one of the comment sections. Was it torn? Was it cut? And then either way, a piece of the shirt is obtained, and that's mailed in the letters, and then you have the 340 cipher. So, in regards to that, I mean, I think that the way you can kind of backtrack the locations is I would agree that Mount Diablo has a certain significance of that because some people are convinced that if you want to talk about geographic profiling, they are convinced that the Zodiac lived in the vicinity of Presidio Heights and that the Zodiac lived in that neighborhood, and that's how he evaded capture. Somebody simply said in the comments section recently that the only way that the perpetrator could have evaded capture is if he lived in Presidio Heights. He murdered Paul Stein, and he went to whatever room he was staying in. Okay, I mean, room he's staying in. Doesn't have to be like a permanent fixed address or something like that. But I'm definitely not convinced of that. I'm definitely not sold of that. And people even become suspects simply because they were living in the Presidio Heights neighborhood. So I'm very much tempted to think that what if we go backwards and say that Mount Diablo was indeed the scouting point where the locations were determined and then the radian is drawn and it connects Blue Rock Springs golf course. That's something that I've read in the past, that the golf course is the true line that connects Blue Rock Springs to Mount Diablo. The line doesn't actually go to Blue Rock Springs Park where Darlene Ferrin was murdered. But the Zodiac did say very clearly in that letter that we were reading, though, in the letter that says, this is the murder of the two teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl on the 4th of July near the golf course in Vallejo. Did you know that there are two L's in Vallejo? I certainly did not know that. Um, sorry. But, yes, I mean, so it shows you that the Zodiac could have heavily been aware that the radian is going to Blue Rock Springs Golf Course, but perhaps that just wasn't that significant. And Michael Butterfield also has a lot to say about more or less challenging the radian theory if we want to, let's just leave it there. So that is another major place name. Also, Michael Cole wrote in his book Zodiac Revisited Volume 3 that Mount Diablo might serve an additional purpose in the sense that Diablo means Devil Mountain in Spanish. I might not be able to spell Vallejo, but I can tell you Mount Diablo means Devil Mountain in Spanish. So wrote Michael Cole in his book. Thanks, Michael, by the way. I really enjoyed Zodiac Revisited Volume 3. And Mount Diablo is the mountain where the Zodiac wants to put himself on top of, put the radiant on top of Mount Diablo. It's almost like a psychological element of taking over the Devil's Mountain. And the Zodiac is also thinking about that on the 20th of December, right before the winter solstice. Is it possible that the Zodiac Killer expected that the bodies of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen would be found on the 21st of December? Talk about the Lake Herman Road shooting. So then you would have someone who is committing a crime and wants the bodies to be found on the 21st, the darkest day of the year, the epitome of darkness, epitome of evil, epitome of darkness, putting himself on top of Mount Diablo, trying to become the most dangerous animal of all. This person is someone really who would be fueled by insecurity, but creating this type of delusional fantasy where he can just act like, I am above everyone, I am above all humanity, I'm even above evil itself. So the place names might have some significance. But in relation to Mount Diablo, I don't think too many people suspect that the Zodiac had some type of residence or connection nearby. I said I wouldn't talk too much about suspects, but there is a suspect out there named William Joseph Grant. He's known by a couple other names. Andrew Todd Walker and George Russell Tucker are two aliases that have been attributed to him. And with William Joseph Grant, his home, allegedly, I mean, I saw some photos of William Joseph Grant's home that had Mount Diablo in the background, and that there are lots of pine trees there where you get the peek through the pines element, and maybe Mount Diablo was then chosen because of proximity to a suspect's residence, but that's a little bit more guesswork and almost a little bit too much speculation. So I think that we have some things about place names that could be somewhat significant. I would just like to point out one detail that isn't so much about geography. It is just that if you go to the Melvin Belli letter, you will notice a big change in the handwriting from some of the other material that I've been reading off about how, like the Z32 cipher, as well as the letter that is talking about I'm the murder of the two teenagers at Lake Herman. If you look at the handwriting on the Melvin Belli letter, I've always said that this one is drastically different. It is much neater. It almost looks like it's written by a different person. The word Zodiac even seems to have a different type of printing. And if you go to the Phillips Petroleum map, which has Mount Diablo selected, then you can see almost identical handprinting, and it definitely appears, in my own unprofessional opinion, I am not a handwriting expert, but that there's the same handprinting from the Melvin Belli letter and that is on the Phillips Petroleum map. But I do have to always go back to this point that it looks like there is different handwriting on those two documents, those two pieces of paper, the map and the Melvin Belli letter, compared to many other Zodiac Zodiac letters, and the ciphers themselves seem to have a different type of printing. It's much neater. It is all very clear. But I would like to go back to this San Fran Bay Area angle in the letter that contains the Z32 cipher. Is there any possibility that the Zodiac was someone who was a native Californian but did not grow up in San Francisco, like within the city limits, and does not have this direct connection to the city of San Francisco, because that is one that is other things to suggest that the Zodiac may have been a native Californian and very local to the area, or I mean, perhaps even Vallejo is. If Lake Herman Road is connected to Benicia and there's this shortcut there, that is most likely going to be used by someone who has intense familiarity with the land, intense familiarity with the place names and the locations, meaning that not somebody who did not live within 100 miles, like this whole angle about how maybe Ross Sullivan drove up from Santa Cruz or something like that, or how about Donald Lee Booyah coming out of Montana and then like on 3 days later committing the murders of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, someone who did not have that intense familiarity with the location. So someone who was much closer to Vallejo as either a resident worker or perhaps spent a large portion of their childhood there. Now, Donald Lee Booyah is a suspect who was brought forward by Kevin Robert Brooks, and he has a lot of things to say about the Lake Berryessa stabbing, because at Lake Berryessa, that's really the Montana connection. The Zodiac says, I escaped from Deer Lodge Prison in Montana. Donald Lee Booyah was in Deer Lodge Prison. And the Zodiac says that he is en route to Mexico. All I want is your money. And then Brian Hartnell throws the car keys down. And I forget if he actually threw down like some spare change or something like that. But the point is, what do we make of these place names? Are they truthful? I mean, did the Zodiac actually have a connection to Montana? Did the Zodiac actually have a connection to Mexico? Gary Stewart, author of the book The Most Dangerous Animal of All, it's really Gary Stewart and Susan Mustafa, are the two writers of that book, put forward the explanation that their suspect, Earl Van Best Jr., worked in Mexico for many years, or in reality, he went to Mexico to buy old books and documents, and I mean, you could call him somewhat of a roguish antique dealer, more or less. Then he would come back to the United States, and then he would sell them, and that was his occupation for much of his adult life. There was a big discrepancy in the book because they said he drove from California into Mexico and would have driven through Riverside and murdered Sherry Joe Bates, but the ex-wife of Earl Van Best, Judith Chandler, said very clearly he never drove to Mexico. When he would go on these business buying trips, he would always fly, which makes a lot more sense. I mean, to fly from San Francisco into, well, any part of Mexico, it's just more, it's just faster. But to digress from that, what do we do with these statements here? I killed a guard in Deer Lodge Prison in Montana, and now I'm en route to Mexico. I would put forward the bold statement and say that the Zodiac was lying. Now, why do I think the Zodiac would be lying about that at Lake Berryessa? Was the Zodiac actually in Deer Lodge Prison? I don't think so. Was he actually going to Mexico? We know that's not true because 2 weeks after the Lake Berryessa stabbing, there's another murder. Paul Stein is murdered, and also the Zodiac didn't take the car keys. The Zodiac said, I just want your money, and the Zodiac didn't take the money and the car keys. He either said, I just want your money or I just want your car. It's been a while since I've read the transcripts. That was a blatant lie. The objective of Lake Berryessa was to get the victims tied up and to stab them. So, because the Zodiac lied about that, I'm inclined to think that he was also lying about these place names, and one of the few times when I would turn to somebody like Gary Stewart is just say that the dialogue at Lake Berryessa was meaningless. It was just put forward to get the two people, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, to go along with the Zodiac Killer's commands and to do what he said. It doesn't suggest anything about an actual geographic connection, and I would just ask you, the listener, what other geographic connection is there to the to Deer Lodge Prison in Montana? What other geographic connection is there to Mexico? I mean, is there a Mexico letter? Is there a Deer Lodge, Montana prison letter? I mean, it's most likely the person there was lying. Although, to the credit of Kevin Robert Brooks, he did put forward the possibility that his suspect, Donald Lee Booyah, was from Montana, and the county he lived in was Muscle County, which is below Phillips County and below Petroleum County, so the Zodiac sent in the Phillips Petroleum map, and he thought that was actually meant to show that it was about Phillips County, Montana, and Petroleum County, Montana. But I don't necessarily believe that. Perhaps that is a little bit of trying to force a pattern onto the situation, as well as a statement that can be almost too precise for its own good, because I don't really think that the Montana connection is something that should be overly emphasized because it doesn't come up very frequently, and as well as other references. Like we have all of these things about Vallejo and very, very little about Montana or other experiences in Montana. Donald Lee Booyah also murdered an individual in 1957, was it, named Otto Fossen, and he was serving 11 years of a life sentence, got out in 1968, and you don't necessarily get those exact very esoteric references to something like that, the murder of Otto Fossen. Not just like I was in Deer Lodge Prison, which the Zodiac may not have even said. Brian Hartnell recalled this, and then people corrected his statement, of course. But definitely appears like someone has familiarity with back roads, and the Zodiac did not tell the truth all the time, but repeats the names Vallejo, familiarity with Mount Diablo, and also the bodies of water connection. How about that? I'm not the first person to say that. Tom Voigt has said a lot about that. Gareth Penn has talked a lot about that. And even if you look at the other unconfirmed Zodiac killer attacks that took place in Southern California, the Domingos Edwards shooting on June 4th of 1963 occurred on a waterfront area off of Highway 101. It's near Gaviota State Park, near Santa Barbara, near Lompoc, and it's often referred to simply as Gaviota. But more so than that, in terms of bodies of water, Oceanside, where Ray Davis was murdered in 1962, Riverside, where Sherry Jo Bates was murdered in 1966, Lake Herman Road, Lake Berryessa, Blue Rock Springs. So this body of water connection could be substantial, and some people believe that, they believe it's Richard Gaikowski saying he was from Watertown, South Dakota, but I mean, I'll just kind of leave that one where it is. Other people also believe that it's something about the person's name, like he has a name like Waters, Waterson, Waterton, a name that is going to contain something very similar to water, because that's what Gareth Penn put forward in his theory, talking about his suspect, Michael Henry O'Hare, also known as Michael H.O.H., 2 H's, 1 O, Michael H2O, Michael Water. I do appreciate a lot of the things Gareth Penn has put forward, but I mean, pattern seeking is one thing, but that is just like not you heard of jumping to conclusions, right? Gareth Penn likes to bounce to conclusions, but I bet Gareth Penn could spell Vallejo and I can't. So I mean, the bodies of water thing could be significant, but I will propose a very simple alternative to this bodies of water theory. People just go out to places that are near the waterfront. I mean, like Lake Berryessa, like Gaviota, and as well as names like Oceanside, Riverside. I mean, there are lots of places that are named after bodies of water because that's where people put towns and such. I, I mean, this is just where people are. In the Lover's Lane angle, like it's Lover's Lanes that have to have something about water in the name, or that's where people went. I mean, those are the times when somebody, those are the locations where somebody would want to go, rather, not the time. Those are the locations where somebody would want to go. So to look at a geographic profile, if I can say something, in conclusion, I think you have someone who has an intense connection to Vallejo. I would rather disregard this type of bodies of water connection. It's fascinating. Oh, it's fascinating, but I still have to disregard it for that very reason. I'm not convinced of how significant it truly is. And you also have someone who is spreading a little bit of misinfo and incorrect information in there, so the geographic profile gets a little bit tricky. But I would expect that there's someone who has worked in the city of San Francisco or lived in the city of San Francisco for quite some time, familiarity with Napa and Solano County, California, and someone who is also has familiarity with military bases. Most people think the Zodiac was ex-military, perhaps in the Air Force or the Navy, maybe has a connection to Travis Air Force Base, because Travis Air Force Base is equidistant to Mount Diablo, as is Lake Berryessa. So that could all just tie in together. I mean, Mount Diablo doesn't necessarily have to be a residence. It could be a scouting point of sorts. But this Vallejo connection is something that I would not want to downplay. Maybe someone who did spend a very large portion of their life there, and then they moved to Mount Diablo to use that as a way to determine which Zodiac locations they were going to use, and the crimes were all heavily premeditated. The victims were not necessarily pre-chosen, but the crimes were heavily premeditated. What do you think about anything I've said about trying to make a geographic profile, and based on some clues that I found in the letters, as well as the map and some other material about the suspects? Please share your ideas in the comments section below. You can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com, BlackBoxNet88 in the DMs on Instagram, and you can follow the show on Facebook at Blackbox Online Radio. Okay, that's all for me. I'll see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.